Hi, everyone. Welcome to the new episode of Humanizing AI. Today with us, we have Dr. Reid Blackman. Reid is the founder and CEO of the AI ethical risk consultancy, Virtue, and the author of Ethical Machines. I invited him to the podcast to discuss his new book, The Ethical Nightmare Challenge. A former philosophy professor at Colgate University, Reid has designed responsible AI programs for global brands like Amazon, the US Bank, and has advised institutions like FBI, NASA, and the World Economic Forum. We're privileged to have such a personality from responsible AI field in this podcast. So, welcome to the Humanizing AI, Reid.
Thanks, man.
Thank you so much for coming here. So I would really want to, today we want to focus on your book, your new book. So one thing we could do for the audience, including my students who have read your previous book, is, can we put the two books side by side from your perspective on why we needed this new book in responsible AI now?
Yeah, first tell your students to burn, I think it's chapters 5 and 7 of that first book. They were fine, just doesn't work anymore. So, yes, I could put them side by side. I wrote that book in, I guess it was mostly in 21. It came out in the summer of 22, and ChatGPT came out in the winter of 22, in November of 22.
22, yeah.
So ChatGPT came out a little bit after this book came out. So that book was written when narrow AI was the thing. It was the only thing that people were talking about. And it made sense. And so a lot of things still apply. So the way that I talked about bias and explainability and privacy violations in that first book still apply to generative and agentic AI. But there's more stuff that happens when you get to generative and agentic AI, more risks, more sources of nightmare, that sort of thing. And then the other thing is that the way in which you have to manage or govern those risks drastically changes. So I wanted to write the second book to say, hey, listen, the risk landscape of AI has gotten insane since I wrote that first book. It's sort of compounding complexity leads to compounding failures or potential failures. And so you got lots of risk. And number one, that kind of complexity requires a different kind of governance. And number two, I've learned a lot of lessons the hard way working, with large clients over the past several years. What is it, four or so years since that first book came out? So that it just seemed there's a lot of stuff that needs updating here.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I haven't completed the second book yet. I'm still reading it. But it makes sense what you just said. Your clusterfuck example just came to my mind as I was talking.
That's where we're headed. Clusterfuck AI, in which you have AI agents talking to other AI agents that aren't even owned by the same organization.
I know it's insane. But wouldn't you say that the first book is still relevant to the model risk management teams, though, right?
Oh, that's a good question. Yes. I mean, yes. If you're okay, there's two parts to the first book. The way that I think about it, one part is what are the risks or what are the sources of the risks, and the second is what do we do about it. And a lot of the what do we do about it stuff is about implementing a kind of governance that I don't think is really plausible anymore.
Yeah.
I guess you could keep it hanging around like a vestigial limb, and it'll still maybe not totally vestigial. It'll still do some work if you're still doing narrow AI. But the truth is that I think where we're headed is a place where even those narrow AI models are going to get swept up into larger agentic systems. And so just keeping them as is seems to me like a bad idea. So, if you're just governing, if you're someone who's just governing one model, or you're not thinking about how do we govern the set of AIs within our organization, but just how do I govern this particular model and how do I think about the risks of this model, probably the first half of that book is still relevant. I think the first half of the book is still relevant anyway, to get a grip on bias and explainability and privacy.
Right.
But I think when it comes to overseeing, governing, monitoring, et cetera, I think that we've got to move on from the model that was articulated there.
I agree. And the reason I asked that is I saw this shift at United Health when I was there. We had a good AI governance team that was only looking at classical AI models.
Yeah.
And we had a framework and policy like you talk about in the book. And then suddenly generative AI came. And then we needed everything and we updated. We didn't follow your instruction. You didn't have instructions then. So we updated our policies and everything to, kind of cover generative AI within that, but we added new tests, new monitoring, and those kind of things.
Yep.
I left the group before agents hit. So I don't know what's the state now. So
Yeah.
that was one reason why I was asking is these organizations still have thousands of narrow AIs, right? So they
Yeah.
need some system of governing them.
Yeah.
And what I'm seeing now is banks, mid-sized
Mhm.
banks are separating MRMs from AI governance, and AI governance is only focusing on generative AI. So your
Mhm.
second point really makes sense to me that that might not work because these older models might just come into the purview of the agents now, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's going to be different questions about how best to integrate.
Yeah,
And probably in most cases, going to be a kind of phased integration. I mean, for those companies who have no governance whatsoever, don't create one kind of governance for narrow AI and another kind of governance for generative AI. I think that's probably pretty
agreed.
silly. But for most organizations, especially if you're a financial institution, you've got governance for models. For financial institutions, they've got model risk governance, model risk management, and I think the question is really how do we integrate as opposed to you could just bolt on an additional thing around generative and agentic AI. I think it's silly for the reasons I just explained.
Yeah,
But that said, I also get that you can't just rip everything apart completely and start from scratch as though you've got a blank piece of paper before you. You don't. You have an extremely complicated organization, lots of different roles and responsibilities and procedures and processes and blah 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 blah. And ripping that out and trying to replace it wholesale would be an absolute disaster, a complete and obvious failure. So to me, the question for them is how do we phase integration, not whether we do it ultimately or not.
right. So yeah, a second question that and maybe also kind of like foundational for everybody listening to the podcast. This podcast is supposed to be educational as well. Your cat and tiger analogy and question, I loved it in the book.
Yeah, thanks.
Could you explain that to the audience a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean, the idea is, I come to you and I say, "Hey, man, I've got this cat. I don't really know how to care for cats. Can you help me out?" And you say, "Yeah, Reid, no problem." And you write me up a cat care guidebook. And I take it home and I read it and I apply, and it works great. And I'm happy, and my cat's happy and wonderful. And then I come back to you, a year later, and I say, "Hey, Cesar, thanks. That was great. I got a tiger now. Can you update your cat guidebook so that it includes how to take care of tigers?" And I think your reply to me should be anyway. What are you nuts? No, I mean I get that they're both felines, and they're sort of the same species, but there's no way. This is a totally different beast. You don't just update a cat guidebook. You need a new kind of guidebook altogether. And I think that's the position that we're in when it comes to AI. So people came to us and said, "Hey, can you help us build a responsible AI or AI governance or AI ethics program for narrow AI?" We said, "Sure, no problem. Here you go." They came back to us a couple years later and they say, "Hey, now generative AI is out. Can you help us? Can you update?" And we said at the time, we said, "Yeah, we can do that. We will update it. We'll update this thing." And now they're coming back to us and they say, "Hey, can you update it again for AI agents?" And this is the point at which we have to say, "Look, suppose I came to you with a cat and I asked for a cat care guidebook, right? It's the same kind of thing. We can't just update what we've been doing. We need a fresh start in a way." And we've seen this, we've seen this happen a number of times where, whatever, I'll stop there. But I was going to talk about like regulations and the EU AI Act and how they have to keep revising and the NIST framework. And I think that this continuous attempt to update something that was fundamentally built around narrow AI is just a foundational mistake in how we do AI governance.
Agreed. And one of the foundational thing that we had to do when forming the AI governance team was define AI.
Yeah.
Like what does AI mean for your organization, right? And then from there, then you can start, identifying the systems with AI, and then govern the systems with AI, right?
Yeah.
So I think you're getting into that. And what I when I was reading your analogy of cat and the dog, being the person I am, I started thinking about the whole taxonomy, and I'm like, oh yeah, then at the level of entity, you can just have one governance tool and imagine you'll just, govern everything. And that's
Right.
silly. So it makes perfect sense, right? Um, but for practitioners here, right? So because you wrote the book for the leaders of the organizations, mainly, as you say in the book,
Mm.
um, there's, there has to be a workflow, right? I mean, I always imagine there's a workflow, and I'm used to that workflow as well, where there's a governance team, it collects metrics and information from model teams, evaluate them pre-deployment, and then let them go to deployment or revise it, and then monitor, right? I mean,
Mhm.
and then have some kind of cadence for them to come back. That's the
Yep.
kind of system everybody is used to.
Mhm.
What is the workflow around ethical nightmare challenge that you are envisioning right now?
Yeah. Okay. So I can say a lot about this, and
Yeah.
hopefully it won't be too much. You can interrupt whenever you like. Well, first I should lay out what the ethical nightmare challenge is.
Yeah.
There's sort of two core components to what I think governance needs to look like, or two sort of core components of my solution. The first is, if you like, the framework of the ethical nightmare challenge, which, as you know, is asks three questions. What are your organization's AI ethical, reputational, legal nightmares? What resources will you build in order to avoid those nightmares? And how will you train people to use those resources effectively? So it's just those three questions. What are the nightmares? What are the resources to avoid them? What training do people need to use those resources? One of the most appealing features about these three questions is that they can be asked at every level of the organization. So at the project level, you can say, hey, for this project level team, for this project, what are the ethical nightmares for this particular AI solution? What resources do we have to avoid the nightmares for this particular solution? What training do our developers or our end users need in order to use those tools effectively? Okay. You can ask at the department level or division level. So for HR or marketing, what are the HR department's AI ethical nightmares? What are the resources that HR has to avoid those nightmares? What training do HR personnel need in order to use those resources? Okay. And then you can ask it at the enterprise level. So for the organization as a whole, what are the nightmares? What are the resources? What's the training? So those three questions can be asked at any level. Notably, they're intelligible to anyone and everyone within the organization. Everyone knows what a nightmare is. This is not a jargon-laden set of questions. People know what a nightmare is. We all know, if it's give me a nightmare scenario that's relevant to your role or what you do at work, they can tell you what those things are. So that's sort of part one of the solution, is these three questions. Part two is how those questions get answered. And the answer is that they get answered by what I call ethical nightmare challenge, or ENC teams. So an ENC team is a cross-functional team. Let's say it's an AI solution in HR. So you're going to have at least one data scientist, one who specializes in risk mitigation around AI. You'll have someone from HR. You'll have someone from risk or compliance and or legal. You'll have someone from maybe cyber. You'll have maybe somebody from privacy around regulations, so on and so forth. So you have a team, ENC team. The mission of the ENC team is to answer the three questions. So you could have project level ENC teams, where of course they're at the project level, how do we avoid the nightmares? And what are the resources that we're going to build? What training? And then you can do it at the department level, at the enterprise level. So department level ENC teams and enterprise-wide ENC team. Okay. Though their mission is to answer those three questions. So I'll stop there for a second, and then I'm going to answer the rest of your question, but I don't know. I'll pause there for a second. What do you think so far? Make sense?
That's making sense to me. Yeah, that's making sense to me. I think you set up the groundwork for understanding, ethical nightmares, the three questions, as well as how the challenge looks like, right? And also now what we're getting into is there is a team that does this challenge, right? So I think we're still trying to get into what does the workflow look like, because everybody's used to workflow and getting the things done, right? So what does that look like in this framework?
Good. So you didn't get to that chapter yet. That's chapter 6.
Yes.
So if you take these cross-functional experts, someone from HR, someone from data science, someone from legal, and you just say, hey, go solve the problem, they can't do it. But if you give them a structured way of engaging in collaboration, that they can do. So I created a 7-step method that says, here are the 7 steps the team is going to go through. I also, when we're working with clients, they get the method and they get trained on the method, but they also get a worksheet. And in the worksheet, they're going to record things like step 1 is create the ENC team. There's some, requirements, or at least strong recommendations around how to create that team. One of the steps, of course, is identify and score nightmares. So you're going to collaboratively identify what are the nightmares. You're going to record that in your worksheet. You're going to discuss what the severity of that nightmare would be on a score from 1 through 5.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to score the likelihood of that you're going to list the ways in which those nightmares might occur, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just the bad thing. Nightmares are bad outcomes, but there's the way that the bad outcome comes to be. And then you're going to collaboratively score the likelihood of each one of those paths to those nightmares, right? So the likelihood of a nightmare is really a function of the likelihood of going down the paths to those nightmares, the pathways to those outcomes. So you'll score those things. That's going to give you a preliminary nightmare score. So, right, or to put not in my language, a preliminary risk score.
Yep.
That's going to allow you to prioritize appropriately. Now you can start collaboratively thinking around, okay, what are the resources and what's the training? And then you're going to think about, then you're going to go back, all this is filled out in the worksheet at each step of the way.
Okay.
What are the potential resources? How are you going to know the resource is working? So what are the metrics for knowing whether that resource is working? What do we want that risk score to be? who's responsible for it, let's say it's developing a resource or delivering some training, et cetera. You got to go back, at the time we get to like, what is it, step, I don't know, 5 or 6, rescore. So we're going to go back to, for instance, the likelihood score. And if we've done our job well with creating the resources and the training, that likelihood score should decrease. If you're at the project level, this is the one difference between a project level E&C team and a department and enterprise teams.
Yeah.
That the project level team also has to score detection probability. Like, once the AI is deployed, what's the likelihood that we are going to detect an unfolding nightmare, right? Because if you have something that's pretty high risk, but you know how to keep a really close eye on it, and you can see early warning signs, and you can intervene in the right kind of way, then you're safe to deploy, all else equal. If it's high risk and you're like, I don't know, we don't really have very strong monitoring tools here, very high, then you probably should not deploy, right? Even if it's a low likelihood to happen, if it's a high severity but low likelihood, but also you're very unable to detect it when it starts unfolding, that's really dangerous, so don't do that. So the project level teams have to score the likelihood of detection. Anyway, so all of this is going to give them ultimate scores, and then they're going to make a recommendation about, okay, given our initial preliminary nightmare scores, given the resources and training that we've developed, given the new scores for likelihood and detection, now do we feel comfortable recommending this thing for deployment? And all that is documented in the worksheet, and the team is led through those 7 steps while simultaneously filling out the worksheet. Whatever.
Makes sense.
I think that's it. That's it.
Yeah.
So you have your metrics, you have your audit trail, you have like, here's what the team did, here's why they did it, here's how they scored things, here's why they're recommended for deployment. All that's in the worksheet.
I see. Perfect. And you're right. I hadn't read that chapter yet, so that makes sense now. So
now you don't have to.
Yeah, I want to. So here's the thing, right? So I understand it now. Now you almost have like a federated model here, where there are smaller teams with ENC, and there has always been debate on should it be centralized or federated. You are advocating for a federated model here, so that the project teams can have closer eyes to their models. Is what you're recommending here, right?
That's exactly right. And there's a number of reasons why I want the federated model. I think the centralized doesn't work. The centralized model is the standard approach. The standard approach is the one that I articulated in Ethical Machines, my first book. It's the one that I practiced and advised my clients on for the past 6 to 8 years. It doesn't work for a variety of reasons. Here's one way. There's 2 ways in which it doesn't work, both having to do with bottlenecks. One is that if you do this very much top-down thing, it's extraordinarily slow, because then you've got to get the C-suite aligned and the board aligned, and a policy and an enterprise-wide policy in a Fortune 500 company takes over a year to pass, easily. And so then it's not even implemented, and you're trying to implement this thing, but then the technology evolves, and now you're implementing an out-of-date policy, and you've got to get the C-suite and the board to get aligned again on new policy, and this is like a never-ending effort. So that's and they're one source of bottleneck, because you're spending a year plus trying to design the AI governance program. Meanwhile, AI is off and running, and you're just behind the time. So that's one kind of bottleneck.
Yeah.
Let's suppose though that all that goes swimmingly well, and just amazingly it gets passed, and for some reason you have a phenomenally rapid ability to update policy and implement policy, which I've never seen anywhere. But suppose there's another big source of bottleneck, which is that the way that a lot of these companies do AI governance now is that lower level teams flag their projects, their AI projects, or their solutions that they're getting from vendors as high risk, or they they score it. It comes out to be high risk, and so it gets escalated to some kind of risk board, risk committee, risk board, responsible AI board, AI ethics board, whatever you want to call it. The problem is that as AI adoption increases, there's a couple problems. But the main one is that as AI adoption increases, that risk board becomes a bottleneck, because that risk board is usually comprised of relatively senior executives, which they need to be in order to have veto power and the ability to tell product teams, no, you're not doing that. So they've got day jobs. This is not their full-time thing. They might not be AI risk experts. And so if things just keep getting piled onto this committee, they're going to be slower and slower and slower in responding to people's requests to move forward, because it's a big lift to oversee a whole AI project, let alone dozens. The problem compounds when you think about agentic AI, where pretty much every agentic AI solution is sort of high risk. That's the nature of the
Yeah.
beast. And so you don't get you don't get AI agents at scale unless you have a way of dealing with those risks at scale. And having a centralized risk board is a surefire way at failure. So that means you must, if you're going to do this at scale, push greater responsibility and powers onto those frontline teams.
Agree. Totally agreed. And even before agentic, as I'm talking to these leaders, in big organizations, they are already thinking about variant models because it is not scalable, like you're saying. Model reviews take at least 6 weeks in most organizations, and banks is a different story. I've heard anywhere from 4 to 6 months, and then they have to come back quarterly, which is just really bad. So I love, federated. But on the policy side, right? So the question that keeps on coming to me is, if you don't have this high level policy at an organization, then it just seems like people won't do responsible AI or ethical AI. They just don't want to do it if there is no mandate for that, right? So how do we go around that issue? Like, what are your suggestions there?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things to say here.
Yeah.
One is that I think that a lot of people, especially in financial services, they know they need to do governance. They just don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
And the policy is of no help. And I could talk more about financial services and model risk management and why that seems to be falling apart in an interesting way. Look, policy is fine. I think it's neither the most efficient nor most effective tool in this case, but it's just one tool among many. Of course, it depends what your policy is. If your policy is, hey, implement ENC teams as appropriate, great. I love that policy. If the policy is a list of generic requirements, then I don't like it. There's a bunch of reasons for this.
Yeah.
Here's one of the core things. Agentic AI is highly context dependent. So when you build an agent, someone's building an agent. They have some kind of model, typically some kind of LLM. They're connecting it to a certain set of tools. They're using it for a certain purpose in a certain context. And all that changes from agent to agent. Who's using it? Why are they using it? What tools they're connecting their agent to? How it's calling on those tools? What gets done with the outputs? All that is highly context sensitive. So how do you deal with that with phenomenally generic policy? Let's say the policy entails something like, this is how it usually goes. Here are the 20 things that you need to do, the 20 controls or the 20 procedures. Okay. The first 10, let's just suppose, those first 10 that's relevant. That works. The next 10, they're not relevant for this particular agent. And then there's a whole nother 10 that are not on the list, but are highly relevant to this agent as well. So I don't think you're going to get, and so what you wind up with is doing things that don't matter. Like that's the second set of 10, doing things that don't matter, and then not doing some of the things that do matter. That's the third set of 10. So that's a disaster. That's like, and then you multiply that by the set of all agents, and you've got tons of gaps, right? So that seems like a bad way of proceeding. Yeah. So I don't really get how policy is supposed to deal with this, other than here's the policy, create ENC teams when they're appropriate. And then, I offer everyone questions like, there's a question about whether you need an ENC team. Answer these, like, here's 5 questions. If you answer yes to any of them, probably you do. Or I also like to say, look, you could be formal or informal about these kind of criteria. Yeah. There's a couple things you can be formal and informal about in my approach. One is, we talked about already, when you reconvene. Yeah. So you could say, we're going to reconvene every week. We're going to reconvene every month. It's just a rule that we have, every quarterly, every 4 to 6 weeks. Maybe you do it informally. Whenever we sort of catch wind of something's gone slightly wrong here, one of the monitoring metrics is showing us something is up. So you can do it informally like that, or you can do it formally, like it's regular. It's on a regular schedule, or maybe some combination. We're going to do this every month or every quarter, but we're also going to reconvene when X happens. Same with what was I just talking about? What was the other thing we were talking about?
No, I mean, basically we're talking about the policy and I think like the
when you form an
ENC team. Yeah, exactly. The main point
when you form an ENC team, here are like 5 questions.
Right.
You could have a formal approach of like, If you answer yes to 2 or more, then you must form an E&Z team. That's a sort of formal approach. You could have an informal approach. Answer these questions and then make your best professional judgment as to whether you think it's appropriate to form an E&C team based on your answers, and make sure to record your answer to that question so we can audit that.
Yeah.
I sort of, my own view is something like let 1,000 flowers bloom. Banks are going to want more formal stuff.
Yeah.
Consumer packaged goods companies might want something a little bit more informal. Whatever works.
Yeah, but the framework works, right? That's the
Yeah.
main point. And I
Yeah.
think when I was talking about policy, I was thinking about exactly what you said, right? Go implement ENC teams, because even that coming from the top leadership matters. Because some organizations have that. At United, we had that where it says, say like every AI system has to go through responsible AI evaluation.
Yeah.
That's it, right? That's
Yeah.
the policy.
Mm.
There's nothing else on this is what you need to do. That's our team's responsibility on helping the
Yeah.
individuals, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
that, and some organizations don't have it. And because of that,
Yeah.
it's just, oh, we have AI council. If you need support, go there. That I don't see working, because then
No
people
way.
just bypass it, right? That's what I was trying to get
Yes.
into. Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's got to be some kind of typically some kind of requirements to do the thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Strong
Um,
recommendations don't work.
Right, right. Another question was more on the paper trail, because I know you briefly touched there, but you know, AI governance teams usually have lawyers and legal teams, and they want paper trail. Um, could you again? I know you have talked about this slightly,
Yeah.
but how would paper trail be generated in your framework?
I mean, for me, when we work with our clients, we give
Yeah,
them the templated worksheet. And so take the templated worksheet, download it onto your system, put it wherever your company thinks it's appropriate to put it. But you're going to fill this thing out collaboratively as a team. Hopefully, by the way, you'll have someone from legal and or compliance on that committee. So it's not just like these project teams are going to do this stuff and then they're going to give it to the legal team. No, there should be a legal representative, a representative from legal on the team, so they're already getting their input from day one. It's not just sort of like a checkbox down the road. And those worksheets can be reviewed in a variety of ways, right? So now you can do things like very simple audits, like binary stuff. Was the worksheet filled out? Was it filled out correctly? Were all 7 steps followed? Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. You can do more qualitative assessments, like did they do a good job identifying all the relevant nightmares? Do we think that there are some nightmares that they should have spotted that they didn't? Were the resources adequate? Was the scoring of the likelihood reasonable? So you can do that kind of oversight as well. The binary stuff is easy, especially because in many cases it can be automated if
right.
you like. The more qualitative stuff, you can do random sampling, right? So we're going to do a random sampling, and if people are, now we're talking about things like how do you assess the maturity of your ENC
Yes,
implementation.
implementation, right? Right.
And there's lots to say about that as well. How well are they doing? Are they doing a good job identifying the nightmares? If not, why not? Stuff like that.
Perfect. Perfect. Those were the main questions and today I really wanted to focus on your book and
Yeah.
talk about your framework, right? So,
Yeah.
uh, one last question before you go. What's the nightmare that you're watching right now unfolding in the world of AI that you are mostly worried about and you don't think there's a solution yet? I know agents and the
Yeah.
clusterbook AI in the book is there, but anything else that is scary to you right now?
I mean, I'm not one to be particularly afraid of things. I think that at the moment we don't have what we need for agentic AI,
Yeah.
even from a technical or from a training perspective. I think people don't know what they're supposed to be looking out for. They don't know what the risks are. So only maybe some data scientists know about cascading failures in agentic
Yeah.
systems,
Yeah.
systemic risks in agentic systems, risks related to autonomy. I don't think that stuff is very well known.
Yep.
So, if anything, if something were to keep me up at night in this context, right? If you're
Yeah.
talking about like society at large, now I'm going to
Right.
talk about the deterioration of the informational ecosystem. But putting that sort of society-wide stuff to the side,
Yeah.
and if you're talking about something like corporate governance of AI, then it's the fact that they're trying to figure out how to use AI agents, and they have not a clue how to govern it. I'm going to say one last thing because I mentioned, I sort of referenced this earlier, but it seems,
Yeah.
I don't know, I find it very interesting.
Yeah.
The industries that have been, the industry that has been ahead of everybody else is financial services.
Yep.
And financial services has been ahead of the game because they've been doing model risk management for decades. And this actually made them very difficult for me and my team to work with, and we usually don't because, frankly, they're like, "No, we already know everything. We already know everything about model risk management. We've been doing it for decades. We have the regulations. We're good." On the other hand, healthcare has been very behind because they don't have that sort of organizational muscle or capacity to do model risk management. So they've been really behind, in my view.
Yeah.
Um, and also they're phenomenally high risk. So you take inexperienced with model risk management, add to that the risks in the healthcare system, and you get lots of slowed innovation. But what's really interesting, I think, is that now the financial services people don't really know what to do. And I learned this pretty recently because I gave a keynote, I don't know, maybe 2, 3 weeks ago. The audience was Fortune 500 financial institutions, specifically people, both practitioners and executives in the model risk management space. And the talk I gave was, of course, some version of the book. And it essentially said that, the big claim that I made is the way that you do AI governance is broken and you need a new approach, which 2 years ago, or even a year ago, if I had said that to them, they would have booed me off the stage, I think. But now with AI agents, they were it was an extremely warm reception. And afterwards, I was doing a book signing, and I had people coming up to me, and one after the other, just, "You're totally right. You're totally right. You're totally right." And it kind of shocked me, frankly. But then I realized, oh, right, because everything that I've been talking about, what AI agents are, is it's a model connected to a whole bunch of stuff.
Right.
All these different tools, databases and software and the internet, and they've been monitoring, they've been managing the model, this tiny, relatively tiny thing, and an agent is a model in an ecosystem of other pieces of software, and they're like, "Well, they don't know what to do with that." And so if they're behind, if they don't know what to do with AI governance, then there's no way that healthcare does, insurance, um, CPG, you name it. No
Yeah.
one else is gonna know.
Yeah. Yeah. And there is also that regulatory. They thought they had regulation, and what happens just
Yeah,
now is the
deleted.
regulators just said, "Oh, we don't cover anything." SR11, SR26, NZMRM, it says generative AI. We don't know. You figure it out, right? So now they
Yes,
don't have the
amazing.
governance as well. So,
Yes. So at that same conference, at that same
yeah.
event that I gave that talk to, one of the other speakers was David Palmer, who's one of the architects of what is it, SR 11.7. That's the
Yeah.
regulation that
Right.
governed model risk management. And I was like, "That's over. It's now deleted. We have a new one.
Yeah.
It's a little bit looser in a variety of ways. And by the
Exactly.
way, we're still trying to figure out generative and agentic AI. We don't have anything to say on that yet."
Yeah.
And so the way that model risk managers know what to do is by knowing what the regulations are. Those are their marching orders. And now they're being told explicitly there's a kind of sort of model-esque or model-related thing, the generative AI and AI agents, and we are explicitly giving you no regulatory marching orders. And so
Yeah.
if they don't know what to do now, they're just sort of at a loss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would also say it's an opportunity for them because now, MRM does the predictive models that they will exist. They will continue to exist, right? And they
Yes,
control that.
absolutely.
But the new AI governance framework that they need for generative AI and agentic AI, it's a white space now. And something like your framework can be used because it's a white
Yeah.
space. There's
Yeah.
nothing.
So I think that's the hope. So now I'm talking to a bunch of banks about exactly this, bringing the ENC to their banks. We'll see what happens. I'm cautiously optimistic. But again, those model risk management people who just deal with the predictive models, they're going to get swept up into the agentic systems, and they're going to have to be able to, even if they're not the ones who do AI agent governance, they'll have to talk to the people
Yeah.
who do AI agent governance so that their models can fit in the right sort of way and get called on in the right way. Blah blah blah. So yeah, and there's a lot of turmoil. So, it doesn't keep me up at night in the sort of, "Oh my god, I literally can't sleep." But if I think about where are the biggest risks that I see right
Yeah.
now, it's governing AI agents because there's just no one has the institutional sort of muscle memory because it's a totally new thing.
Yeah. One related question though, right? So this was a couple of months back though, when I talked to a Fortune 500 healthcare insurer, they said they only had one real AI agent in production.
Yes. Yes.
So is it as big of a problem, or are we trying to be ready for a situation where the proliferation just happens?
Yeah, so I don't know. Yes, I agree with you that AI
Yeah.
agents are slow to actually being developed. There's also people play very fast and loose with the phrase AI agent so that
Yeah.
they call things that aren't agents, so they can brag. Um So here's what I would have told you before, and I used this metaphor in an article a while back that look, when it comes to responsible AI or AI governance, no one wants to build the seatbelt until they know that the car works,
Mm-hmm.
which is reasonable. So look, let's first figure out whether the hell AI works, and if it does, then we can figure out how to build the safeguards, the guardrails, the whatever, the responsible AI program, the governance.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that made a pretty good deal of sense, both with narrow AI and with generative AI. It makes a lot less sense to me for AI agents. And the reason is that I think it's so here's the appeal of AI agents in part. Not only are they these LLMs connected to lots of tools,
Yeah.
which gives them access to lots of things, they can do lots of different things, but they also have the quote power of quote unquote autonomy,
Yep.
the ability to figure out which tools to call on, when, in what order, how, given the user specified goals. So they exercise this autonomy or freedom with regards to how they pursue these user given goals. And in so doing, they're making, thousands of decisions or whatever it is. It's so obvious that things can go off the rails easily if they're not properly governed. And so does the AI agent work? And is the AI agent governed? Are, I don't think, as easily separable in practice
Totally
as it
agree.
was with generative AI and narrow AI.
Totally agree. Totally agree. I think you cannot just let AIs in production without having that governance built in. It just like I can't. I mean, anybody can foresee
Yeah.
the risks of doing that. So
Like,
hopefully, people who
y-
are doing that can foresee that
well,
as
so on that point, I actually think that's why I think we will see, I think we are seeing an uptick in people doing AI governance things because it's obvious, as you just said, even to the non-tech person, anyone to whom you say CEO, zero tech experience, like they're not AI people, they're not coders, they're not good at math, whatever it is. You tell them, hey, we're going to give this AI access to lots of, software and data, and we're just going to let it do it. It's going to autonomously do its own thing.
well.
That CEO is going to be like, that sounds fucking crazy. That's a what? And so since the risk is so obvious, I think the push for governance is more natural.
Yep. Yep. So thank you again, Ray. I mean, fantastic discussion. Thank you for making time to come here, talk about your book, talk about the framework, give us examples, and share the knowledge with us. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thanks for having me, man. Great questions. And yeah,